that's a perfect segue to my next question. I'm glad you brought up the deficits. Finger pointing aside, the fact is that the U.S. does have a large and growing federal debt. Both parties, I think most people would say, have been fairly complicit in that. How will we ever turn it around? And what would be your solution to get out of our hole and, again, turn around our spending? Do we need to raise taxes, or will we be able to actually cut programs that people count on? What's the Donna Milo plan?
Well, actually, certainly raising taxes should be out of the question. You can't continue to burden the. We saw what happened. The stock market lost, I think, around 300 points, 3% of its value on Friday, and that's when the government was announcing positive economic numbers as far as employment. They said that there was a creation of 431,000 jobs. Well, guess what? There was only 40 some odd thousand for, I think, around 41,000 jobs created in the private sector. The other 300 some odd thousand jobs were government census part-time jobs. I mean, so how did the markets react to that? Well, with a little gloom and doom. Why? Because you certainly cannot continue to increase unemployment benefits, continue to increase government spending while not giving incentive for private business to create wealth. Without the creation of wealth, you cannot sustain government spending. So the answer is certainly not to raise taxes on those that are working and producing. The answer is to give incentives to businesses to create new wealth, to basically reduce regulation. And, you know, we have to look back at history, I think. We have to learn from history a little bit, too. So our production started to increase prior to our engagement in World War II. And, of course, when we entered World War II, we had the beginnings of the mechanisms to produce for that war. And, consequently, at the end of World War II, the European industrial mechanisms were basically non-existent because they were decimated during the war, and so were the Asian industrial systems were decimated during the war. So in 1946, if you wanted to buy a diesel engine anywhere on the planet, you had to buy it from us. You know, any type of heavy equipment, machinery. So we became a country that was producing, and we produced goods and services for the entire world. We built a lot of wealth. What was happening is we were producing goods here in our country, exporting goods, and bringing in wealth from the rest of the world. But by about 1970, and you have to look back also at what was happening in the 1950s and 60s. U.S. industry was so productive that when the unions came to industry and said, you know what, we want more benefits, we want earlier retirement, we want industry, we say, sure, is that all you want? Where do I sign? Why? Because we were making a lot of money. So we could make those deals, we could make those contracts. But what has happened is that by about the 1970s, Europe was back, Asia was back, and we started to have to get competitive. And certainly, we started to change our business model from a producer nation to a consumer nation. We thought, well, you know what, if you're building televisions at the Zenith factory, how about we just send the Zenith factory overseas, and you'll now be, instead of a TV maker, you'll be a TV seller. And we're going to be able to buy these things so cheap from somewhere that you'll sell 10. Instead of making one TV, you'll sell 10. We'll convince people that they need one in every room in their house. And we're going to be okay. But what started happening is our money started to leave. Our money started to leave the system. The money started to go in the other direction. So when that model wasn't working well for us, we said, well, we still have to get people to buy 10 TVs, so let's relax credit. Let's make it easier. Instead of you having to have the money to buy the 10 TVs, you're going to be able to purchase them on credit. So we kept allowing a system, but we didn't change our business model. We didn't. So the little bit of manufacturing that we still had in this country still had the same labor union contracts, things like that. We didn't change certain aspects of our industry, and so what has happened is we haven't been able to be competitive. We have so many environmental regulations. We have so much regulatory compliance that it's very difficult for business to be competitive. And not so much because our labor is expensive. Our labor is not necessarily expensive. We're very productive. So I think that's a wash. The problem is the regulation. So what has happened is that we have not adapted. We have not adapted. So business is leaving. In order for us to get business back, in order for us to create new wealth, we have to entice U.S. business. We have to entice small businesses and large businesses alike to invest, to manufacture, to do things here. But we have to allow some of the same practices that companies benefit from in other countries. We have to allow some of those practices here, because otherwise businesses won't return, and wealth will continue to leave the country. Oil is a prime example. We're sending anywhere between 350 to $700 billion a year overseas to countries that are not our friends. That's right. Wealth leaving our country for energy. So many things we have to do. So my plan is to encourage by giving tax credits where tax credits are necessary, easing of regulation where easing of regulation is necessary, to engage businesses, to bring manufacturing, to bring industry, to bring business back to the United States. Certainly not taxing America. It's not about taxes. It's about making it easier for business, not harder for business.
All right.